And the public outcry over the crackdown of a Bronx street vendor will lead to changes in how the city handles these situations in the future. In fact, Mayor de Blasio vowed to not let this happen again. Listen.
This shouldn't have happened. I don't blame any one person or agency. I think this is a classic thing of bureaucracies not communicating and not using common sense. If you got a lot of good quality food, let's get it to a homeless shelter or food pantry, someplace where it can be used. Of course, we would never throw it out. So I'm disappointed, and we're going to have to figure out some quick new approaches to make sure this never happens again.
Meanwhile, the vendor who had her fruits and vegetables confiscated last week is back in business. Diana Hernandez Cruz is a single mom, and she says she doesn't have a choice but to get back out there and make money to feed her family, even though she doesn't have a permit.
So those permits are hard to come by, which has even led to an underground market where they can go for up to $20,000 each. The Street Vendor Project is an advocacy group that's pushing for more permits. Now they're taking their case to Albany. So Carina Kaufman-Gutierrez is Deputy Director of the Street Vendor Project at the Urban Justice Center. She's here with us this morning. Good morning to you, Carina. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me on.
So we'll get into the permit conversation in just a second, but I want to know what happened to Diana last week in the Bronx. Was this an extreme case, would you say, of enforcement, or does this happen regularly to vendors operating out without a permit and sometimes just not caught on camera?
It's a great question. So street vendors are our city's smallest businesses, right? Vendors like Diana are exactly who we urge the city to support because they're out providing a public good. However, what happened to Diana is unfortunately not a unique case. For far too long, street vendors have suffered abuse and harassment at the hands of the city simply for trying to provide a service and earn an honest dollar. Without a permit, they're targeted, as she was the other day, without even being given the opportunity to get one to formalize their businesses. So what happened to Diana, unfortunately, is completely legal. That's why we need laws to change so that this can't ever happen again to Diana or to other street vendors.
And it is a widespread problem. I spoke with vendors in Corona, Queens. A lot of these folks are new vendors because of the pandemic, forced to go out there and you put up a vending station to sell things just to provide for their family. So what are you doing to help those folks, many of them undocumented, to apply for a permit to be able to sell their wares?
Right. So the way that the city works right now for street vendor permits for folks who sell food or for folks who sell merchandise is that they need to have a permit or a license in order to vend. And unfortunately, there's no way to access those permits or licenses due to an arbitrary cap that was placed on the number available in the 1980s, right? And so anyone who is looking to start a business as a street vendor and do it in the right way, which if you talk to any street vendor, right, they want to get a permit. They want to go out and work in safety because otherwise what happens to Diana can happen to them. And so we are advocating for there to be a fair street vending regulation system that allows for folks who want to do business lawfully as street vendors to acquire a permit. So, this is a benefit not just to the street vendors, but to all New Yorkers, because then they'll know as well that the foods and merchandise that they're buying have been are being regulated as well instead of being forcefully outside of it.
So Diana lost somewhere around $10,000 because that food was just thrown away. And what you're describing here is a bit of an archaic system then, right? Because it's not she's not the only street vendor that's being forced to work without a permit. So you're estimating somewhere around 20,000 street vendors across New York City, and because of this cap, they can't get one and they have to wait for some time. So that brings me to the next question, this underground market where permits are actually going for these wild fees. Can you explain what's happening there in this underground kind of underbelly of getting a permit?
Absolutely. So because there's this cap on the number of permits and licenses available and such a high demand from folks wanting to do business lawfully as street vendors, there's a system of an underground market that's developed where those who did receive a permit back in the 80s, back in the 90s, when they were a little bit easier to come by and are still holding on to them, are renting them to the folks who are the real street vendors who are out working for upwards of $20,000, $25,000 every 2 years. Whereas
Wow.
if the vendor was to be able to rent the permit directly from the city, it's a $200 cost every 2 years. And in order to do that, they're paying their taxes, they have their Department of Health certification, they're regulated exactly the same way that restaurants are regulated. You walk around, you see a halal card, right? There's an A on it because they've been
Yeah.
inspected, just like any restaurant has been.
And just real quickly, I know that there's been a lot of outreach to help her. Diana, can you tell us how people can help her out? I know there's a GoFundMe page.
Yes, there's actually a group of city workers called City Workers for Justice who saw what happened and said, you know, this isn't the city that we work for. This isn't the city that we love. We want to support Diana directly. And so they created a GoFundMe. You can find it by going to our Instagram page, Street Vendor Project, and click on the link in our bio to donate directly there.
Karina, such good information here. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, of course. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more conversations about getting those permits.